Hi, everyone. Welcome as you're flowing in here. Welcome to tonight's event. Officially here, I just want to thank everyone again for joining Barn Raiser and Farm Action for this very exciting webinar we have tonight with Joe Maxwell and Sonja Trom Eayrs. We're really lucky to have both of them in conversation here tonight. And just to introduce you all to both of our organizations. So my name is Justin Perkins. I'm the Deputy Editor Publisher at Barn Raiser. Um, so Barn Raiser is an independent nonprofit newsroom. We were founded in 2022 and dedicated ourselves to covering rural and small town America. And our aim is that by connecting local organizing strategies and uplifting change makers and underrepresented voices across rural America, Barn Raiser builds common ground, encourages democratic participation, and inspires change for the flourishing of rural communities. And co-hosting this webinar today is really excellent organization called Farm Action. Farm Action is a farmer-led organization that develops and advances solutions to stop corporate monopolies, hold government accountable, and empower farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. Something very important to this theme tonight. Through their research and policy development, Farm Action works towards a food system that works for everyone, not just a handful of corporations. And tonight, of course, we're here gathered around the theme of undoing corporate power in rural America, which is a huge topic. We could probably spend hours here, talking about that alone, but we have just a sliver of time here, and we're going to do what we can. And we're joined by some really excellent people who are going to talk about this at different levels. Sonja from her experiences growing up on a farm in Minnesota and through her new memoir, Dodge County Inc., and Joe through his really excellent career across so many public service sectors and policy. But first, I'd like to just sort of set the stage for us tonight. We're going to talk about some things that are sort of difficult realities so many people across rural America are facing, but we're also going to hopefully envision sort of how people from all walks of life, whether you're rural folks, whether you're farmers or you're urbanites, how we can sort of unite together to resist corporate power and corporate domination, and to envision a better food system, not only for the health of our rural communities, our farmers, for our water as well, for our land, our air, and our democracy. Um, so um, as you all might remember, through things like pandemic supply chain disruptions to recently headlines and news events involving the skyrocketing price of eggs. Clearly, the industrial food system that we have today has come with big costs. Um, Even though American consumers are used to having food and meat at cheap prices. Um, and a lot of this phenomenon can be traced back to the 1990s, when a new production model called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, as they're known for short, began to take hold in the industry, first in poultry and then in hogs and dairy. Uh, the pillar of this model, this corporate model, is relies on what are known as economies of scale and vertical integration, which essentially seek to maximize profit and exercise corporate control over every aspect of the production chain. And as Sonja Trom Eayrs illuminates in her really excellent book, Dodge County Inc., which details her experiences and her family's experiences with CAFOs that moved in next door. The pork industry here provides a pretty striking example of the way that CAFOs have uh, sort of emblematized this corporate consolidation of the industry. So today there are 4 corporations that control the majority of livestock production in the United States. They're called the Big Four, which are the Brazilian-owned JBS, the US-based Tyson Foods, Cargill, and the Chinese-owned WH Group Limited. These names might not be, familiar to people every day, but in fact, these companies probably control the majority of brands and foods that you might recognize in the grocery aisle. And recently, Farm Action put out a really excellent report called Kings Over the Necessaries of Life, which is a pretty striking metaphor itself for the way that corporate consolidation has taken hold. And this report Farm Action found that 63% of pig processing now lies in the hands of 3 multinational firms, JBS, Tyson, and WH Group. Moreover, these corporations, JBS, Tyson, WH Group, and Hormel, slaughter about 70% of hogs processed annually. And with about 90% of hogs today are now just processed by the largest 10 hog packers. So this level of dominance and these corporate monopolies are structured all across the agriculture industry. And this has made the livelihood of small and even medium-sized farmers nearly untenable. Between 1997 and 2022, the U.S. lost 45% of hog farms, nearly 50,000 in total. And these are figures that are not just in the pork industry, but are sort of mirrored throughout the meat sectors. And of course, this sort of corporate pillaging of rural communities has had devastating effect on local economies and the environment, and with severe social and economic consequences that kind of get to the core of our democracy itself. And so now, without further ado, I want to turn it over here to our really excellent panelists that we'll have in discussion today. So with us is Sonja Trom Eayrs. Sonja is a farmer's daughter, a rural advocate, and an attorney. She's involved in several rural advocacy organizations like the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, the Land Stewardship Project, and the Dodge County Concerned Citizens. She also serves as a business manager for the Trom Family Farm in Dodge County, Minnesota, and is the author of Dodge County, Inc. And with us as well is Joe Maxwell, who's the co-founder of Farm Action, who, along with his brother, raises hogs, sheep, and grain crops on their 4th-generation farm. Joe's experience in farming, building agricultural supply chains, practicing law, and serving in statewide office are keys to his successful policy development and campaign strategies. So really excited to have you both in conversation here today. So first, Sonja, I want to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about, curious to hear about sort of what led you to write your book, Dodge County, Inc. What was the inspiration for that? And could you sort of tell us a little bit about its genesis and what you explore in the book?
So I have to be honest, what really kind of led me to write the book initially was some of it was my own curiosity. I wanted to find out what on earth happened to my home community. And I don't live in my home community. I live in the Twin Cities metro, but a lot of it was my own curiosity. And then, and I'll get into it when I'll pull up my slideshow. But I also, in getting into this, because my family's been on the front lines for years fighting corporate agriculture. Once I got into this, then I really felt a sense of responsibility and purpose, and wanted to help inform others about, what's what's happened here, and help others understand the significance of what's happened in rural America. So if it's okay with you, I'll share my screen.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
Is that coming up?
Don't see it currently.
Is that up? Oh,
No, I don't.
oh, sorry. Sorry, a little technical problem here.
Oh, good. Yeah. Um, and while just for the audience, while Sonja is pulling up her screen, there will be time later for a Q&A discussion as well. So if you have questions and stuff, feel free to drop that into the Q&A button, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. And so yeah, look forward to hearing your questions here later on too.
Now, is that up on the screen?
Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna get you to the
Yeah, you can hit. Yeah.
from the beginning. Is
Yep.
that it? There we go.
go. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All good.
Our story begins in 1892. This is my great-grandfather on the far right. He immigrated from Norway with two of his relatives. Those other two relatives actually settled in North Dakota, and my great-grandfather settled in Dodge County, Minnesota. These were the days when immigrants were building rural communities. This is Little Westfield Lutheran Church that is situated on the same square mile as our farm. The church has been upgraded, remodeled significantly. We still hold church services there a few times a year. My great-grandfather was the chief architect of Little Westfield Lutheran Church, which is patterned after his home church in Norway. Here's a picture that was taken, and we think about 1932 on our farm. That's my father on the far right with two of his sisters. And you can see that they're out barefoot feeding geese. And that's a special picture for us, but it gives you some sense of how long the farm's been in our family. Actually, this marks the 100th year that our farm has been in our family. This was my grandfather's farm, and my great-grandfather's farm is just 2 miles south of our farm. We're immensely proud of our farm, and we have had lots of family connections in the immediate family with first cousins, second cousins, and other families in the immediate area. We're involved in production agriculture, so corn and soybeans. And I'm actively involved in the operation of the farm. And so I work with other siblings who are also active in operating the farm. One of the first signs of consolidation was in 1993. The first swine factory farm went up 1 mile north of our farm in 1993. During the 90s, my sister Shelley and her husband Dave farmed just outside our hometown of Blooming Prairie. They were independent farmers, which meant that they owned their own hogs. And Dave, my brother-in-law, would take hogs down to Hormel, to the plant in Austin, Minnesota. And Hormel is just 15 miles from our hometown. During that time, in the mid-90s, Dave noticed that the wait times were getting longer at Hormel. He would have to wait 45 to 45 minutes to an hour to deliver a single load of hogs, while the big semis that were coming from these area factory farms were rushed through the facility. 1998 was the breaking point for independent farmers like Dave and Shelley. And, you know, was the old saying we've all heard a million times, get big or get out. And they had to make the very excruciating decision. Here they were in their early 40s. Should they get big or get out? And they opted to get out. And like other independent farmers, they were essentially locked out of the marketplace, and they could not deliver their hogs to Hormel, even though they'd been doing so for years and years, but they couldn't deliver to Hormel. And what's interesting is that during that 1998, which was the breaking point for the independents, a second facility was constructed by that same farmer that where I showed you the slide just a moment ago. But our problems didn't begin and end with just pigs. In 2001, our attention shifted to a large dairy factory farm that was going to be constructed about 3 or 4 miles north of our farm. And my family, along with other neighbors, fought installation of Ripley Dairy, which at the time would have been the largest dairy factory farm in the state of Minnesota. And the neighborhood worked with an advocacy group in Minnesota known Land Stewardship Project. And that fight went on for 3 to 4 years as the community, and this was a bipartisan group, fought installation of that big factory farm. That's my father on the tractor, my mother's in the white coat, my brother's in the front, along with other neighbors that fought installation of that large factory farm. During that fight, and most of those meetings occurred at Little Ripley Town Hall. Ripley Town Hall is just a one-room, used to be a one-room school that's now been turned into a town hall. But one evening, the meeting was moved to this building, this location. This is the old Claremont High School. And the neighbors and the township residents were blindsided because what happened, they walk in and there were 200 chairs set up in the auditorium. And those chairs were occupied by a number of corporate executives, including corporate executives from Land O'Lakes, Hormel, Cargill, AgStar Financial Services, Monsanto, and other industry giants. Today, Claremont High School serves as dormitory housing, believe it or not, for area factory farm workers. Again, our trouble was not over. This is a picture of my parents, Lowell and Evelyn Trom. They are my heroes. They, in April of 2014, my dad called me. My dad would always, I'd call him on my way to work in Minneapolis and on my way home. And one evening on my way home, spoke with my dad, and he was fit to be tied because he'd received only 10 days notice that yet another swine factory farm was going up in the area. We already had 10 in a 3-mile radius. Today we have 12 in a 3-mile radius. My mother had just entered the nursing home. She suffered from advanced Parkinson's. And so here we were with, I had elderly parents in their 80s, and they needed help. And I felt this deep sense of responsibility and purpose, and that I needed to get involved. And you know, if you love something and you love someone, you fight for it. So I helped them find legal counsel so that they could battle out, take on yet another battle. And so my parents over the course of the next 3+ years, actually battled construction of this factory farm and another one that's I don't have pictured. And this one sits 1/2 mile directly west of our farm. There's no farm, there is no family. And the battle was stacked against us at the county level. The Planning Commission and the county board were all situated with industry insiders that waved through an incomplete application form. It wasn't a fair process. And it was at that point that my parents, in May of 2014, initiated their first lawsuit against county officials. But as the 3 separate lawsuits continued for almost 3 years, you know, I realized the enormity of this fight, and 1 lawsuit or 2 lawsuits or 3 lawsuits were not going to make much of a difference. But it was important to fight because there's 2 courts. There's a court of law and there's a court of public opinion. And so we kept this information in front of the public. And what I realized was that we were fighting corporate power and the right not only of my family to stay on the family farm, but the rights of all farmers to stay on the land. And in this process, what I discovered was that the big multinationals had created a corporate pyramid scheme. And at the top of the pyramid, you have the multinationals, such as Tyson, JBS, Hormel, Smithfield. Those are the big multinationals at the top of the pyramid. In the middle, you have integrators. The integrators are companies such as Christensen Farms, Iowa Select, Holden Farms, and other Schwartz Farms. There's other integrators. Those integrators own the supply chain. And so they own the hogs that are flowing through that system. And then they also provide hogs and feed, and veterinary services to the contract growers at the bottom of the pyramid. Then at the bottom, you have contract growers, what we traditionally called farmers. What I want you to note about this is that this is a closed system. The multinationals reorganized the marketplace, created a closed system where all the profits flow to the top of this pyramid, and they can control the pricing that flows all the way down to the contract farmer and that contract grower down at the bottom. This is a portion of our story, but what I've discovered in all of this is that this is not an isolated story, that many of you, and probably many of you who are listening this evening, share the same story. I know that there are so many of you on this call this evening who have been impacted by corporate agriculture. And Joe, can you comment further?
Yeah, Sonja, you're exactly right. This is not isolated. I really appreciate your book. I appreciate your insight. I think telling a story and putting a face on the story is extremely important for us to get the information out. But unfortunately, Dodge County is not the only place that this type of business model, this pyramid, is shown up across the country. I think it's important for everybody to understand that when Sonja talks about these integrators, these processors, these meat packers, they own the system. They own the baby pig. They own the feed that's going to go into that pig. They own the opportunity to price gouge the consumer at the grocery store. They own the right to pollute the land, to destroy the natural resources. They own the right to drive the farmer off the farm. They are extracting the wealth and have extracted the wealth from rural America. drive through the town, many of you on tonight, I'm sure, from rural America. Think back prior to the time that Sonja was brought us into this factory farming. Think about how industrial ag, how dried up your towns have become. It's because these corporations have extracted the wealth, the natural resources, and the wealth from the communities. When I began farming, I was 512,000 of us. There were 512,000 of us independent hog farmers in America. Today, there's less than 61,000 left. Those farm families are no longer in the rural community. The wealth those farm families made off of their hog production, we always, that was the cash flow on our farm, right? The sale of those pigs, turning them around. It's what put gas in the car. It's what put kids through school. It was the source of wealth. That's gone from rural communities. And it's not just in the Midwest. We saw China's Smithfield, WH Holding Groups that Sonja talked about. We saw them build out their operations in North Carolina. They targeted Black, Latino, poor communities to build their hog houses because they knew that those communities had less of a voice. Their voice was weak when it came to the politics of their communities, their counties, their cities, and their state. And so they built out these massive hog houses, putting thousands of head of hogs into one building. And those people, over time, they found that they had higher respiratory disease. They had less life expectancy. Their children were sicker. They found that they were walking in a stream of fecal matter that clung to their clothes, to their homes, and their automobiles. This is the environment that the industrial agriculture model has brought to rural America. And it's not just in hogs. We see in poultry, we're doing work on the egg prices that was mentioned earlier. Farmers raise a contract egg farmers at a time when Cal-Maine, the largest egg producer in the United States, is making record profits off of the avian flu. Those farmers have only seen the price they get paid per egg go up a penny in the last decade. These companies do not put wealth back in the rural communities. And it's not just in meat production. I've just shared my screen. I want to just quickly run down this. This is, you can go to farmaction.us, Agricultural Concentration Hub, find all the details of the different percentages and who owns and who controls in all these sectors. But take a look. Economists say that abuses are likely when 40% of the market is controlled by 4 dominant firms. There's not a market sector left that has any hope of providing economic opportunity for rural America. That's where we are. It's not just in Dodge County. It's not just in my home state of Missouri, and it's not just in North Carolina. This is the story of rural America as we saw corporate power, corporate greed come in and extract our wealth. Sonja, I really hope that you're having great response to your book. What are you hearing from the folks after you published your book?
I am overwhelmed by the response, to be honest. I mean, look at this. Look at these letters that come in addition to comments that are, that I receive on my author website, which is just my name. But, I usually hear 3 comments from people. Number 1, thank you because this book has truly hit a nerve. So the first thing I hear is, thank you for writing this. The second is, I had no idea, people are thankful for the information, they're informed. But the third reaction is the one that really motivates me, and that is, what can I do? How can I get active? That's really the motivating piece for me. So, because people are looking for that next step, what can I do to get active?
Yeah, Sonja, you mentioned, I think 1998, that's the year I remember, hogs, 8 cents a pound. Farmers committing suicide, going bankrupt. And that's a long time ago. And I make a mistake far too often of letting people just say, well, that's the way it is. Or, big is just going to get bigger. I want to tell you something. In my past, I was wrong. I was wrong in not standing up and saying, no, it doesn't have to be this way. Our government at local, state, and federal levels have encouraged the pillaging of rural America by industrial agriculture. It's not always been this way. The last time this country saw this kind of concentrated power in the market, understand that market power equals economic power, because they extract all the money out of your pockets, all the money out of rural communities, they put it in their pocket. They now have economic power, and then they use that economic power for political power.
That's right. It's a combination of both market power and political power, right?
That's it. And that's what they did. And that's how they've taken over our rural communities. We can, and in the past, the United States has, you can go to farmaction.us, go to Agriculture Concentration Hub, and look at the report that Justin referenced earlier on. And you will see that in the past, we've been there. And because the people became knowledgeable and informed, and communities joined together, and neighbors joined together, change occurred. And so I encourage everybody, I'm never going to make this mistake again of just sitting back and letting people say, oh, this is just the way it's going to be. No, it doesn't have to be that way. I don't know, Sonja, Justin mentioned the organizations you work with. Where do you see people getting involved and taking action, or what can people do?
So I'm seeing that I'm involved in a few of these fights. So the front lines right now are, for example, I can tell you where they are. They're North Dakota. I'll tell you, North Dakota recently, in 2019, changed their law. They have now created a situation similar to the state of Iowa. They have taken away local control. And so, God help our friends in North Dakota, because they're trying to push for corporate agriculture. And so people are getting involved, and it's people on both sides of the aisle. And what I'm seeing is folks who are it's a constant fight. It's always the same thing. It's community versus corporation. It's the same repeated fight. So it's North Dakota, it's Western Wisconsin, it's northern Minnesota, and believe it or not, they're pushing into our beautiful lakes country in northern Minnesota, and they're going to ruin it. I mean, the industry has ruined Iowa. They've ruined southern Minnesota, where our farm is located, and they're pushing into these other areas with large dairy factory farms and also large hog factory farms. So those are some of the frontline areas. And so I would say, number one, people need to get active. Find an organization. It could be socially responsible agriculture project. It could be land stewardship project here in Minnesota. It might be Dakota Resource Council in the Dakotas. But there are a number of these groups that are trying to work with communities. And so I would say absolutely get active.
And, I want to highlight one thing. You mentioned the word local control. I think that every one of us ought to want to set the destiny for our own community and be able to make certain decisions at the county or parish or precinct or township, whichever your state is organized, level. And it's very important to understand that these companies, these corporations, these monopolies with their power come in and want to say that, oh, you don't know, you just don't know. And therefore, you shouldn't be the decider of your health and welfare decisions. You just don't know. And then they want to strip you from that right to have any local control, setting the boundaries, the set-asides. How far away from a school should one of these manure factories be? We at Farm Action, one of the things you can do, first thing you need to do, and Sonja, you mentioned this on one of our calls, you had one of your partners or someone there in your office there in Minneapolis area in the Twin Cities said, thank you for writing the book. I didn't know. The first thing I would say that we need to do is be informed. Farm Action has a newsletter. The news roundup comes out every other week. If you don't subscribe, you should subscribe. You can't push back unless you're armed with information. And so one of the things you can do is just become informed. Second, if you have interest, we have a local leaders program. We work nationally, but we need to have voices helping push. And we also need to hear what's going on the ground so we can make the right decisions. One solution doesn't fit every region of this country. But the most important thing is to become informed. There's always somebody in your community. They drank the Kool-Aid. They are big ag, and they're big ag's voice in your community. And they sat back in that coffee shop and they just spout out all this information about how great everything is and how much money and the return on investments on checkoff funds. I won't go into detail on that, but just know there they are in all their glory holding court. What you need to do is be informed of what's really going on. Know how much has been extracted from your community, how many farmers you lost in your county over the last 2 decades, what that's done to your schools, the tax base. And then always start off by just saying, well, what do you think about this? The fact that we only have this many people in our county now or in our town. Hold them accountable for all that mouth they're putting out in that coffee shop. My opinion is where everybody can start is by being informed. Sign up for the newsletters, join the organizations, get informed, and then walk right in, proud, holding your head up because you're armed with information to take them on. And it begins at the local level.
This reminds me, Joe, of the, Food and Water Watch has a publication, Factory Farm Nation, and they just updated that publication. It is absolutely eye-opening. If people, just look for Factory Farm Nation, and you can see, for example, the thousands and thousands of factory farms in Iowa and southern Minnesota, and how these big meat packers and so forth, how they have ruined some of these rural areas. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to people that, schools have closed, schools have consolidated, and churches have closed, local businesses, and people need to join together as part of their community to fight this. And they can do it. There's food is power, but also people acting together and as part of a community. You're also quite powerful. You can, consumers have choices. You can vote with your fork. You can be intentional about your food choices. You can buy local. If you're in a food desert, we have something here in Minnesota. It's on Facebook. It's called Farm Direct, and you can look for a local farmer. Might be a little ways from your home, but it's going to be worth it. You're going to be helping to support that local farm families.
Yeah, I know we're going to kick over here to the audience. I know they're probably writing up questions right now. And as Justin said, go to the Q&A section and put your question in. But, you know, being armed, we have a report that we put out some time ago, but it's still up to date and ready to go. The Truth on Industrial Agriculture. We'll give you one of the myths. It has a Mythbusters. We also have blogs that are called the Mythbusters, you know, to be armed and ready to take them on at your local community, in the coffee shop, or at the school at the next basketball game. Here's a myth. We feed the world. This came to mind when Sonja mentioned about food. This country, this agricultural system, this powerhouse agricultural system of the United States does not feed the world. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even feed us. Mm-hmm. What it does, it raises cheap feed grains so that these monopolies can have access to feed grain that is below production costs, subsidized by your tax money, called the Farm Bill programs, so that we're benefiting China's Smithfield, Brazil's JBS, the Cargills of America, the Tysons of America. We're benefiting them. We're feeding their livestock in these huge CAFOs, all the time extracting the wealth from the rural community and leaving behind a wasteland. One of the myths that needs to be busted is we don't feed the world. We feed pigs in crates. That's what we do in America.
I'll tell you who else we feed. We feed the corporate bottom line.
Yeah, we do that. Yeah, Cal-Maine. Oh, I know we got to go. Cal-Maine, the biggest egg producer. Okay, folks. There's avian flu is real. Those animals have suffered. That is a fact. But these big egg companies have taken advantage of that. They're screaming avian flu. We've got to go up with prices of eggs. During this period of time, Cal-Maine they made more money in a single quarter of last year than they made the whole year before the avian flu. That's the power that industrial agriculture has over the food system, over the consumer, and over the farmer. And I think, Justin, we're going to kick here to answer questions. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we have about 15 minutes here left for a little audience Q&A section. So if you have a burning question you want to ask either Sonja or Joe, feel free to drop that into the Q&A function here below the Zoom. We do have quite a few questions that have come in here. I apologize if we don't get to all your questions here. It's such a huge topic, but we will, after this presentation, we will send this recording to everyone, and we'll also provide a list of resources that are being named on this call, as well as sort of being dropped in the chat here. We'll provide that in an email to all, as well as I think hopefully with a few organizations that you can sort of try to connect with at your local level to get more involved and to educate yourself and your community as well. So one question I'm seeing here from Cameron Dubs is relating to health. He says he's on the board of farmtohealth.org and works within a farm-based healthcare system. And curious to know, I think both from your personal experience, Sonja, and Joe, from your experience at the systemic policy level, what's some of the health information out there about what industrial ag does as it relates to chronic diseases or just the health of rural communities in general?
I actually participated last fall in an event that occurred at Drake University regarding industrial agriculture, the environment, and public health. And I believe that series was recorded, but they had like the top public health officials from across the United States that participated in that event. And there's also a book that was published, and Bob Martin was he was with the Johns Hopkins. Bob was one of the authors, editors, and then also Dr. James Merchant. So I can get you the name of that book. I don't have it right at my finger. I have it, but it's just a little bit of ways here. But that's a superb resource.
I would quickly say, one, I appreciate the question. I believe in the question they talk about the parallel of the rise of chronic illness along with the rise of industrial agriculture. We're the sickest industrialized country in the world. Farm Action recognizes that food, our diet, the types of food that we have access to in America is making us sick. We don't feed ourselves, as I said. Our system produces overprocessed foods for the people, and also it denies people nutritious access to nutritious fruits and vegetables, for which we no longer raise. The majority are imported in from Mexico. We don't hold ourselves out as health experts. We look to others in that lane, but we're informed, and we are working to take action to turn this around for the health of Americans.
We have a sort of a two-part question here from Elizabeth Henderson. It looks like directed more toward a sort of policy lens. Elizabeth asks that when the USDA sends out $10 billion to make up for recent farm losses, who gets this money? Where does this go in that sort of pyramid? And also, what are your thoughts around investments in so-called climate smart programs, especially when they sort of pay for things like manure pits or anaerobic digesters, things like that?
If I could start off, Sonja, on this one, I think you said it's Elizabeth. Is that who asked the question?
Yeah, Elizabeth Henderson. Yep.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you're spot on. I appreciate the question. I am just furious. What I think Elizabeth's referring to is about $10.5 billion that was passed by the Congress in the last CR. It's the way in which they kept the government funded, but they put in there a $10.5 billion payment to farmers. First, if you are a farmer and you make 75% of your income on the farm, you get more money than if you are a farmer who is financially strapped and makes less than 75% of their income off the farm because you had to go hustle a job in town, or your household has a spouse that works in town. You're paid less. One, take away from that, that's an example of how our government supports big over small and middle. Second, those farmers had to come to Washington, D.C. and ask for $10.5 billion to help offset their losses from the 2024 crop. That is the evidence I tried to explain a while ago. Farmers are producing, to some degree, overproducing corn and soybeans. They're selling it for less than their production cost and have to come to Washington, D.C. and ask for your all's tax money to bail them out. Now, who benefits from that? I'll tell you who does. The very people that drove all those families out of Dodge County, because they're getting cheaper feed grains than what the market price should be. That's where, so ultimately that $10.5 billion winds up subsidizing the very meat packers we're talking about tonight. That's who gets it, because they got lower than production cost feed grains. Great question. On the other climate smart money, Farm Action called out, you can go look at our blogs and stuff, called out Secretary Vilsack and others for wanting to put a happy face lipstick on the pig when they wanted to invest in digesters. in order to try to somehow solve the environmental impact of these huge buildings with these pits under them. They wanted to convert the manure through these digesters. We were not pleased at all with a lot of the expenses on Climate Smart. Some of the Climate Smart money went to the right people, but unfortunately, a lot of it, once again, just another example of how big industrial agriculture has political power, because they have market power, economic power, and they have political power, and they steered what could have been a tremendous program for the health of our planet and the health of our communities and the financial health of our farmers, and steered a lot of that money over to the very people we came tonight to discuss.
Yeah,
Just one comment on that quickly. I include this in my book, but you might remember a few years ago, we were burying big piles of dead pigs, and we had these big piles down in southern Minnesota. Nobody would tell you where they were burying these dead pigs. But then I pulled the data later, and the dollars went to not the contract growers at the bottom. And I have copies of a contract. The dollars went to the integrators in the middle, the big integrators like Christensen Farms and so forth. They're the ones that were paid and made whole, not the contract growers at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, building on that, we have a question from Daniel Romano, who asks that who comments that I agree we need to be informed and tell others in our community and beyond. Daniel asks, what is the next step? These corporations have control over our rural communities, our supply, and our lives, and they are not going to give up that power willingly. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say this. First of all, speak truth to power. I will tell you personally, I have somewhat of an unusual situation. I have one foot in the Twin Cities Metro, one in southern Minnesota. When my family started pushing back, we started to receive all kinds of harassment and intimidation that went on for years. And I described that in the book. But what I discovered in all of this was that my family was not alone. And so there are lots of frontline families. And so unfortunately, farmers in these rural communities have been silenced by the big multinationals. And so you have a voice and use it. So for me, quite honestly, the most empowering thing is, if I'm attacked personally, I know I'm on the right track. And for me, the last 10 plus years, I knew I was on the right track. And when I get, when they point a finger at me, I just knew, like, all right, you keep going when you're in that situation. And you know what? I know I'm not alone.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Sonja. First is organize at the local level, so that maybe you have the tenacity and the courage to stand by yourself and grin at them. But a lot of people have been pushed back, pushed down, stepped on, that they just don't have that in them anymore. So help lift them up and let them know that they aren't alone and that you'll be by their side. I don't know if this person, Daniel, is a farmer or not, but it's not just the farmer's fight, right? That's hopefully we've conveyed that here. It's the people living in the towns and elsewhere. But there's many farmers that feel beat down. So they're not the enemy. So organize, get to know each other as neighbors. Then once you build kind of a collective of power at the local level, in your neighborhood, express that at your county level. If your county has planning and zoning, push for it. These are industries. They're not farms. They're tax base. Go to the state level. Many of these areas learn your environmental laws. Many of them on the permitting process are using the same tract of land to spray the manure on. Hold your DNR or your EPA accountable to ensure that there's not too many of these darn buildings built, that the land won't hold all the nutrient value they're spraying on it, and it winds up in your groundwater. Go out and test the water and do a baseline and then record around these facilities the changes in the water, in the surface water, as well as any of the wells in the area. Join Farm Action's efforts and Farm Action Fund. That Farm Action Fund is our C4. It does the lobbying in Washington, D.C. We're always happy to have people help lift up their voices and help us get in the doors of their members of Congress and their members of the Senate. But it begins by being informed and lifting up others in your neighborhood so you all aren't standing alone. We have to have a collective of folks working together.
Absolutely. And you know what? You'll actually find out slowly, and I'm finding this out with the book. Do you know what happened in the last month or so? 2 people who I have never met in my lifetime wrote to the local newspaper and in support of my book because it touched them. And so these are the things that people are doing to get the word out there. This isn't my story. This is my story, but really at the end of the day, it's our story. And I want to hear from you. And I want you to go out, if you will, contact your local newspaper or contact others, share your story, tell what's going on, because I know there are hundreds and thousands of us in the same boat. By the way, I see that there was a question here about the book that I referenced. It's called Industrial Farm Animal Production, the Environment, and Public Health. Industrial Farm Animal Production, the Environment, and Public Health. It's edited by James Merchant and Robert Martin.
Cool. Well, thanks for that, Sonja. I think unfortunately we're sort of at the end of our time here. I want to say first thanks to both our excellent panelists, Joe and Sonja. I hope I can speak on behalf of everyone and just saying a big thank you for your time here tonight and for all the insight and knowledge you've provided here. And I hope it inspires everyone to do those things we've just talked about, of organizing their communities and educating themselves and take action. Again, we'll have a recording of this webinar and resources. We'll be able to link that back to you all here. And I, again, want to encourage you all to check out Sonja's book, Dodge County Inc. If you haven't yet. You can go to her website, her personal website, to find more information and resources about that. Check out Farm Action. They have incredible number of resources on their website. Sign up for their newsletter. And at Barn Raiser here, we're going to keep covering this issue very closely as well. So I hope you'll sign up for our newsletter and reach out with your own tip and story. And I hope at Barn Raiser we can sort of be part of to help you sort of help people keep telling their stories and keep bringing these realities to light here. So thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your evening here.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sonja. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks.
Great to see you. Thank you.